on this computer. Cool. All right, how's it going? This is Dr. Marina
Good. So nice to
Mangano
see
with
you.
my friend Thomas Shute here. We are going to be talking about one of my surprisingly my favorite chapter in the book, Gift of Healing Hands. And this is chapter 5, and it is about quantum healing, quantum energy, a little bit of quantum physics, this kind of hot topic word in film industry. And I included it in my book because I really wanted to start to break the gap between science and the invisible type of thing. So this whole chapter is about quantum energy and a little bit about that electric system within us. And my friend Thomas here is a wonderful healer, yoga teacher, and definitely incorporates all of these type of energy frequencies into his classes. So Thomas, you were the perfect person for me to speak to with this chapter. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your practice.
First off, I'm honored that this is your favorite chapter and I get to be the guest that gets to help
Yeah,
speak on it.
it didn't
Oh my
start that
gosh.
way, but we'll get to that.
I'm Thomas and I am a Kundalini yoga practitioner. And also, I began my journey doing readings, psychic readings, and mediumship, but I kind of led my practice to a more physical route because I love movement. I grew up in like acrobatics and dance and gymnastics. So I kind of that's what my book's about, actually. But, we kind of worked our way to here we are in this now space. And I just love to work in that quantum realm, essentially, is where I'm at in this present moment.
Yeah, and so currently I know you're doing a lot of really unique like yoga classes in the area and things like that. Would you say you try to, are you mindful of trying to incorporate these, half science, half energy into your classes or
Absolutely. So, a lot of people that come to my class for the first time, like I don't know what their background is, where they're from, or what they're already have studied, essentially. So, my goal is to really kind of break down the science, the physical nature of these metaphysical sciences, and bring
Mhm.
them to a more tangible experience, which in Kundalini Yoga, a lot of times you do have those experiences on a physical level. So,
Right.
yes.
Yeah, and that's, it's almost like the doorway to yoga when people meet yoga. It's very physical. It's probably like a hot class, a power class. And so you just mentioned Kundalini. I definitely want to get into that. But let's take like a general step here for a second back to just kind of introduce like I'm just like throwing this out because, this is our realm, but if someone had never heard of the word quantum or they've just seen Ant-Man quantum universe and that's the only recognition of that word. Just kind of to explain it a little bit, when we go through our traditional schooling system, we learn Newtonian physics. So everything is like an equation. It's very predictable. There's kind of like the laws of our, physical, visual, tangible world. So quantum physics, quantum mechanics, I am not a physicist, so we're not going to get into it too much. I really wanted to in the book because I was like, I'm going to have really skeptical people. I need to hand them the science. Since then, I've gotten much more practical, but we'll just, generally, quantum physics, quantum mechanics are more the sciences for things that we cannot see. So if Newtonian is everything we can see, we can touch in our world, quantum physics kind of is the too small world and the too big world. The universe, the expansion of the universe, and then these like really tiny subparticles, subatomic particles, excuse me, that build on top of each other to create mass, like our body and the frequencies that our body emits and interacts with in the world. So when you're thinking like when someone says quantum something something, they're either talking really tiny science or really big, kind of hard to comprehend science. And it's confusing to people because there is no equation, there is no predictability. It is the melting and surrendering to unpredictable, the helpful organized chaos of the universe and our body. So why do I talk about this in my book? I'm not a physicist. I'm not, because it is turning into such a hot word, like I said, but it's also turning into this like tangible title that people you hear a lot in the healing industry. So someone can say, I'm a quantum healer, and you're like, what on earth does that mean? So I grew up in a lot of, my orthopedic background, very medical background, started to take this weird turn in yoga and started to take this weird turn when I would go take these energy training classes. And even in this book, the progression, this guide of this book was like pretty normal stuff. This is that chapter. This is that, like, breaking down the barrier. Everything past this is non-tangible, the subtle body. So we wanted to talk today, and why I wanted to have you on today was it is so normal for us, but if we had to like remember, going back and learning this, if we had to introduce like a new student walking to your studio, how would you, gently describe the subtle body?
If I were to generally describe the subtle body, I would probably start somewhere with like the chakra system, which are like the seven main energy centers within the physical body and subtle body, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 'Cause to me, the subtle body is nadis, it's meridians, it's chakras, it's in Kundalini yoga, the practice that I practice.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually 10 bodies essentially, but then you have like in Vedic, in the Vedas, you'd have the koshas. There's five koshas. There's like these etheric bodies that are connected and intertwined with our physical bodies,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. Um, I would essentially basically, break it down by explaining the chakras in a simple guided meditative state, or even move them through the spine, because it's a beautiful way to kind of allow them to physically tap in to these energetic pockets of information.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I
they're
would
just like, okay,
definitely.
I've heard of a spine. Yeah, I can, yeah, they're like, all right, spine, I get. People understand that there is a nervous system centrally that, runs through the spine and it goes out to our peripheral nervous system. And so when they're like, okay, what anatomy are you talking about? What do you, we're trying to ask people to like peel back this, I know everything, or I can explain everything mindset, and just sit with themselves. And yoga is a wonderful practice to do this. It's, how we got introduced to it, but there's a lot of other gentle meridian, like you said, acupuncture based things that expose people to their electricity. And I think that's where it's like we can kind of keep people on the hook because we talk about electricity. So you
Yeah.
mentioned chakras, and you mentioned the spine. Why do you think why is the spine so symbolic of like our central energetic house?
So I truly believe that our channel to source, or that higher perception of life, you can call it God, you can call it source. To me,
Mm-hmm.
it's like our higher self, our like super subconscious, right? I
Right.
think that Shushina channel, that channel where the nadis can run through, and for us to intuit information, run through the spine. And you can find through years of like esoteric text, and also just physically sitting with yourself, sitting or even lying down if you can't sit up, if you can't sit,
Mm-hmm.
cross legged, you'll feel that energy kind of activate. A lot of times they would describe it as the cerebral spinal fluid. For
Okay.
me, to physically understand it, we could call it that. But the spine is kind of like that, like erected cobra. It's like that center of wisdom almost. You can look at it and kind of put a mental picture to it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's a way to physically feel a space within the body. Because how do you physically feel like this etheric channel running through your
Yeah.
the
No,
midline of
that's
your
a great way to put it. It's like
physical
an
body?
axis, the central
Yes.
whole of our foundation that everything coordinates around and off of, and it gives us our main structure. Obviously in my chiropractic world, we believe that, the spine is the hub, the nervous system is the hub to everything. And, while they're speaking, and like, it depends on who you're talking to, right? If they're talking to somebody who's like, not really initiated in the energy world, I talk electricity, I talk physics, I talk like static. Like people understand getting zapped, people understand having nerve pain, right? Because they've felt it. um it's like, how do I encourage those people to take a step into the weirder world of like making them really have to sit with themselves and experience something that they may can't verbalize? I think the first time I, in my hardened brain at that point, had that experience was with sound bowls. How would you, How would you describe sound bowls or like healing bowls to people?
Oh my gosh. So my first time I ever experienced sound bowls was actually a gong meditation. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just essentially the same. I mean, you're moving metals to create a frequency of energy.
Right.
And the gong meditation was so powerfully incredible. The fact that obviously I was breathing because I was aware of how breath works and things like that, but I'm just laying there, like all tucked in. And like within, I don't know, like maybe a minute and a half of this sound emanating, you kind of just become the sound bowl. You become the gong. And in that first time I experienced it, I felt nothingness. I felt like I was levitating, like I felt no pain, no thought, no nothing. I just was. And it
Like
was,
sensory deprivation, right? Like you blend
yeah, like a
into,
float tank or
yep, you blend
yeah,
into the sensory experience around you. It's
it,
that's
it's
exactly how it
powerful.
was. The first time I heard a sound, actually, I didn't know what I was hearing. I was in a power yoga class, right? Because I'm like, I'm an athlete, I'm here to work out. And it was a 75-minute class. And I thought that that meant you're going to move the whole time. The perk of that chunk of time is that the last like 15 minute was dedicated to Shavasana, which is what is like a meditation, a closing meditation. And the woman, I later found out was a very gifted sound bowl healer. So, there's these Tibetan metal bowls and they come in different sizes, and each size correlates with a different frequency. Lower frequency, deeper sound, bigger bowl, right? And then they get smaller as they correlate with the different regions of your body. And yoga practitioners believe that those frequencies, once played, can like target. And of course, you know all this, so I'm explaining this, but yeah, and they target the different parts of your frequency channel, that spine channel, those accumulating centers, chakras of yoga. Um, and I was just laying there relaxed, like, loving my life. And I thought this woman was walking around with like a gong or something, because you could hear this like whoosh, 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 whoosh sound. And I heard it on the right, then I heard it on the left. And I'm like, wow, she's really walking very quietly, like not disrupting anybody. By the end of class, they guide everybody to come to sit up. And she was at the front of the room playing these bowls. She wasn't walking around with them. And I just like had to ask afterwards. I was like, did you like walk by my head a couple times? She was like, do you see how big this thing is? Like, no, I can't walk and play with these bowls. And that was the first time I was just like, wow, like I experienced how frequencies travel. And I experienced that we are a medium, bodies are a medium, the bowl is a medium, and like that it can go through seemingly no medium, the air, and hit us and affect us. And that probably opened my door to trying to learn more about sound frequencies and healing frequencies. Have you ever had
Wow.
like a really weird experience that you noticed like your body like absorbed like a local area?
Yes. So I think most recently, and when I say most recently, they've probably been around for as long as I've been alive, probably both of us, but
Yeah.
I feel like they're just becoming very popular, is the crystal sound bowls. So
They're so
I
beautiful.
remember
Yeah.
when I first got into all this stuff, we had Tibetan bowls, which were like seven different metals, like you were describing them earlier.
Mhm.
But now they're coming out with these quartz bowls. And honestly, like sometimes I can't even like it feels like not that it's dragging me down the spiral, but it kind of it engulfs me too much that actually I feel like it opens me up so much that
Mhm.
it's like I feel I don't even know what's going on. I'm like all like freaking out because it's like it's so intense, and I'm like I can't do this. I can't
Yeah,
do this
it
because
for someone not like used to energy, it could feel like they're like panicking, like they, if you have this like high pitched frequency and you're not in a good space for it, or you're not prepared that day, like it could make you feel like you're
yes.
peaking to like a panic attack type thing, if that's what you're kind of describing. How
Yes,
did you bring yourself
what you're
back?
saying is exactly. Yes, because a lot of times people like, I want a spiritual awakening or I want to experience this sound healing. But if you're not physically or mentally prepared that day and you just
Mhm.
kind of go into it, and then this one frequency is happening to affect, the frequency of the emotion grief or something, and you're not really ready to let that go at that moment in time, it's like
Yeah,
you might actually experience those emotions or and it's not that it's bad, it's actually I'm sure it's all for the good intent, and like it's going to
like good
help you move that
triggers. Yeah.
energy, but it's
Yeah,
like if you're
I just had
stubborn
someone
like
home.
me.
I just sent someone home. I love that you can now basically just turn on a playlist, a Spotify playlist of healing frequencies, and you'll see these numbers next to them, and that's what they're trying to describe. It's the hertz, the measurement of, how low versus how high frequency is. You hear people saying like good vibes and good vibrations, like they're usually talking about, living in a high frequency world. And so I said it's called, do you play Salvaggio frequencies, or you just turn on?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
I don't know who
yes.
Salvaggio was, or like what.
I've always wanted to know, and I never even cared to look it up because
Sounds
it's
like
just
a
like
good
the
Italian
generic.
boy, but but it's
Yeah,
Solvaggio, Solfeggio. And if you look up this playlist, I would recommend starting at pick the track, pick the song that is the lowest number, usually in the hundreds,
I
and give
agree. I
yourself
agree.
time to work up
Yeah,
to, what is it, 900? I've seen 900 hertz.
yeah. Nine something. I usually stick with 528.
Hmm.
Um, because
Where does that
it's I
correlate with
believe
the
it's
body?
the heart,
Heart.
I believe.
Hmm.
And I feel like I'm not trying to like I'm just good right here. Open me up here, let me feel the love, let me be the love, let me accept the love. But I
Absolutely.
totally agree with starting at a lesser uh frequency just because it's lesser's not worse. It's just more grounding, more stable because it allows you to feel safe essentially. I mean, that is the little heart, the root chakra, the base of the spine. And what is it, 120 something,
Yeah, 120, something like that.
one
I feel
something.
like for most of us and like the lifestyle that most Americans live in, that's probably the part of our body where we have the most issues, right? We have, financial strain that burdens our low back. We have, relationship traumas in our pelvis and our pelvic floor. So the belief of these frequencies is that, working with the lower frequency is trying to, shake out the stagnation of that lower part of our foundation. I love the example of like, do you ever, when a dog like gets up after a nap, what's the first thing they do?
Down
They like,
dog.
yeah, they like, well, yeah, usually they like shake out
Oh
they
yeah,
like,
always
I should have
shaking,
said like,
always shaking.
yeah, they like to switch moods, to switch experiences. Dogs always shake in between, or if they get hurt, they kind of like shake it off. And it's that like tangible motion of energy, mixing up energies that I'm not afraid to like ask people to do and to people understand. And they need those little like examples. They're like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
I've
Um,
heard that analogy in when like an animal in the wild hunts, and my breathwork instructor Amanda actually taught me this. When an animal goes to like prey on a another animal, like in the wild,
mhm.
they'll shred the animal, do the thing, and then afterwards they shake to release the trauma of like the adrenaline and maybe their muscles were sore and they were holding on to something, and they
Yeah.
shake,
It's like a
vigorously.
neural tone. It's like a neural reset. That's, part of chiropractic too, is like we're looking for different areas of your body that are maybe your neural tone, your electric system is too low, too stagnant, or a lot of people are so like hyped up, oversensitive, easily triggered. Our goal for chiropractic is to kind of bring people back, just like yoga, just like breath work. And in this quantum realm, when someone describes themselves as a quantum healer, that really is what they're talking about, that they believe in these frequency practices. They believe in an energetic, not necessarily a touch, but a feel practice that's trying to bring you back to, a neural equilibrium, so that you can vibrate correctly, so that all the different organs have their own little like EMF pockets. I always describe it as like a symphony. Like each organ is an instrument, and they all relatively have their own sound, their own frequencies, but all together, if they're in a healthy system, we should be pretty symphonic. We should be pretty in tune. So I think, the easiest description is, people recognize that your heart gives off this EMF radiation, but it's not like a microwave. That's, people think that radiation is always like gamma, like these really crazy
Yeah,
high damaging waves. But it's just an electric impulse. The tiny little atoms in your body that have these circulating environments are held together by magnetism. So if you times that by the, trillions of cells in us, it's a miracle that we are this like seemingly solid mass when reality we're just this like vibrating sheath of tiny little particles. So I can get really tripped out by that if I let
Yes.
myself. But I
Yeah.
like that, people understand, they may not get like why they're affected by maybe negative people or why they're affected by hyped up defensive people, but I try to like bring this into that conversation of if your heart and that electromagnetic field around it, it's kind of like constantly sending out these little feelers. We have our own little like, perimeter of sensors that we can't necessarily see. And when someone steps into that with like an alarm, that's that intuitive, like that guttural, something's up. So in
Mhm.
yoga, I'm sure, do you ever, well, certain things like, oh, like trauma informed yoga, they ask us not to, come right up in someone's experience. We try to like give them their space. How do you talk to these, maybe not using the word auras, but how would you try to talk to these like frequencies and these EMFs around us in a yoga class?
So I always say in Kundalini, I always want everybody to keep their business on their own mat, if you will. I'm like, this is your little portal, these four corners, like this is like your magic carpet, and stay
Yep.
here and don't worry about anybody else. In my practice, the eyes are usually closed like 95% of the time. So I don't really
Mm.
have to worry about anybody worrying about other people's energy because no one's looking at anybody. And that's usually what everyone's insecurity is.
Right.
But when you're chanting and you're creating these sound frequencies through chants, or you're doing breath work and you're changing the velocity of energy around you, even if it's a mudra and you're connecting circuits of electricity,
Hmm.
or putting yourself in a position, you're creating an energy frequency in a space, in a room. So we usually call it the container. And I always say, if somebody's struggling to do something, let's say it's a Kriya, which is a set of action in Kundalini, where you're doing a repetitive motion over and over again for a couple
Hmm.
minutes at a time. And let's say somebody's struggling. I always say, one, close your eyes and visualize yourself doing it because your subconscious mind doesn't know if you're doing it or not. It's
Right.
so
It's
you just have to
practicing all of
visualize.
the motor pathways anyway. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's really what we're supposed to be doing. So if somebody's struggling, I always say that everybody's energy is affecting everybody in the room. And that doesn't mean, oh, if five people are struggling and one person isn't, that they're all bringing them down. It's just that we're all creating momentum in this little quantum field in this
Hmm.
space, right? It is going out into the entire world. And that's, I've got to reel it in.
Yeah.
But
Collective
I
consciousness.
always Yes, yes. So I always say that you're creating a frequency, a vortex in this space, but this is also I always say too, what you're doing on your mat is the same thing as what you're doing off your mat. Meaning when you go home and then you're encountering some weird situation that doesn't feel as blissful as this class might feel, but
Right.
these frequencies are always emanating, if you will. So I know, and I like what you said about the EMFs. They're not all bad. Like
Right.
a lot of times you'll find people saying the radiation from the cell phone and the cell phone towers and the microwave and the kitchen appliances, but you kind of need electromagnetic frequencies EMFs to be in existence. Like the Earth, I know it vibrates at the frequency of our heart space, so that's why people always say go walk barefoot, go put your
Hmm.
hands in the earth. So if you can realize that the earth is vibrating at the same as our heart space, it's like how could you not know that that is so true to just simply and think about it. Everyone's
Just so
wearing
tied
rubber.
together. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, everyone's wearing rubber shoes. They're in a skyscraper. Even right now, I sleep on a sheepskin so I can stay kind of connected to earth, but
Mhm.
I usually wear silver lined clothing to help stay connected or block any sort of harmful EMF. But they sell grounding mats and copper. I have copper on the bottom of my shoes just because it's important for us to be human and evolve and be a part of this world, but there's always a way to still stay connected and to be aware of the fact that we are connected to frequencies that are maybe invisible to some that aren't
Yeah,
of this
no,
life.
no, well said. That's like kind of the overall like how I would like sum up. Some people like read this chapter and are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I was just trying to learn about yoga and what hamstring stretch I should do. Like, where is she going with this? And so I like encourage people to, if you're not ready for this like invisible, big, esoteric conversation, come back to it. skip, do the tangible stuff, do the mentality stuff, the mind things, and then come back to this, because it's just like we're trying to basically think tiny to see big, right? Or feel tiny to understand big. So it's, the daunting aspect of this word quantum, because I feel like in movies and things like that, they just like don't know how to make a science thing work in a plot. They're like, oh, I know. We'll use the word quantum and then nobody will ask questions. But what you said of like, you create your environment, you create, the frequencies that you live in. We cannot, let's go back to that old school, like stuff we learned in school, right? You can't create or destroy energy. That's a law. We understand that law. We've taken the test on that law. We're like, okay, we got it. So if we can't create energy or can't destroy it, like we have to share it. We have to kind of engulf it from others, bring it into our system, whether it's, different types of energy. Kinetic energy is like movement, what you're talking about. Thermal energy is like, creating heat with friction. We can like feel that pretty easily. And that was probably one of the first, when I took my first energy healing class, they made us do this, and they were like, all right, rub your hands together. Go ahead, Thomas, try it out. We're going to rub our hands together. And then once you feel things getting hot, you very slowly, very gently start to release. And yeah, you're pretty good at energy work, so you can like jump out. But for someone who's trying to understand, they'll stay really close, and you can kind of feel the tingles, you can kind of feel the heat, and you practice this more and more, that you should be able to, work your way larger, and then almost feel that little resistance, almost like the what were those like finger trap things called? Like as you pull
Yes,
out,
the
it
Chinese
pulls
finger
in.
traps.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
That's what this is doing. It's like as we pull the energy away, we should feel it like wanting to find home, find, alignment. So, maybe I went to that class with a little bit of a questionable eye, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. But then once you have the physical experience, like maybe you're suffering from pain or mentality pain, like anxiety, once you have someone work on this stuff with you and you feel better, who cares if you know how to explain it? You're like, oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you for releasing this frequency that was obviously keeping me at a certain level. And so the EMF conversation, like you said, really does freak people out, because, they see so many posts, and now there's so much merchandise to like block your EMF waves. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's like, we live in a modern world, it's unavoidable. So just like
exactly.
any like trigger that could bother you, harmful television, violent music, like all these things that could trigger you, we can't ignore it for the rest of our lives, but we can work on ourselves to build a resistance to it. And I think that's the EMF conversation that I have with people, is like, hey, how can you, put yourself in as healthy environment as possible? Yes, but get your electric system in check, get your nervous system in check, so that when you're exposed to it, you're not zapped. It can kind of go through
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
You can engulf it and transmute it into like a better energy system. What are some of your kind of beginner level EMF tips that you would recommend?
I would say my top number one. It used to be other ones, but there are other ones. This is my new favorite one. It's the torus field meditation.
Okay.
So you essentially draw. You could sit, or I mean, to everything I always say, I'm usually meaning I would sit down. But if you can't sit, you can lay down and do it. But it's just easier to visualize. But you
Okay.
bring energy from the ground up through the Shushuma
So
nadi, or you could say the spine.
visualizing or breathing or
Yes. Yeah. So you would visualize. I would inhale to draw up, and then you would exhale. It would go around, not only on the sides, but also all directions of the body. And then again, it would circulate from the base all the way up again. And this to me kind of increases a field of like not only magnetism, but it kind of for me is like an ego eradicator and Kundalini yoga, or something that would kind of like be self-generating. It would be self-sustaining, and you're not doing a lot of work to kind of harness this energy
yeah.
like
Oh,
an
so
intense movement.
I thought when you said Taurus, you meant like astrology Taurus. You mean that shape that looks like an apple core,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's a yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I can pull the spelling up, but it's like the center looks hollow because it has this like cylindrical core, and
Yes.
then the core
Yes.
just like blends into this like top mushroom shape, but then it immediately gets sucked back into it. So you're saying like use that visual as a breath, as an alignment to kind of in my how I would put it, like circuitry, like a continuous
Yes,
circuitry.
1000%. And this is also, I mean, there, you could do this standing up. I just don't recommend any sort of like, I guess we could call them frequency increasing meditations or visualizations. I don't like to do them standing up because you could fall over, and that's
Mhm.
another way to prove that it's real. Like you literally like there's like a circulation body of light where you would draw energy from the feet and you would circle it up to the top of the body and then keep going. That like I've fallen over before at a younger age when I first learned it too. Like
Oh
that's
yeah.
and that's another way to physically prove like this is not like some made up, like it's truly something's happening here, you
Yeah, that's
know.
what people
And
call like that yoga high, right? Like when they leave class and they're kind of like head high, like kind of buzzed. To me,
yeah,
that's you released good stuff, but you also then need to come back and you need to like
yeah,
feel your
ground it.
body.
Yes,
And a appropriately trained teacher like should guide people to that. Um,
I agree. I
I've
agree.
made some scary driving decisions after like yoga class in the beginning. I always
Oh
say I'm
my
like,
God, it's not safe to drive after
I
certain
know.
classes. It's not.
Now I'm good at grounding, but back in the day, yeah, I would leave and be like, "Oh, that was a stop sign. Oh my gosh."
Yeah,
So
no, I
that
agree.
that
I was
that
running
yoga
like
high is
55.
real.
Yeah, and for me, the yoga high is another way back to the healing frequency sounds you could play on your phone.
Hmm.
When you get that level of ecstasy or bliss from a yoga class or a breathwork class, or even I'm sure it happens after chiropractic sessions too, because you're releasing cerebrospinal fluid or just having that trauma, move or transmute. I,
Hmm.
I think it's another way that it proves that those higher frequencies like are no different or better. They're not higher is not better than these
Right.
lower frequencies that keep us grounded and stabilized. Like it reminds us that whoa, like if you blow the hatch door open, like you got to learn how to like shut it a little bit and like come back in, you know?
Yeah, like when if the people have seen it on TV, like a heart rate monitor, the wavelengths don't. There's not just this like line graph. Like a wavelength
Yes.
means a peak and a slope, a peak and a slope, and then a high vibration just means that the distance from one peak to the next peak is faster. It's closer together. So you can fit
Yeah.
more in my little window here. This is like a higher frequency versus a lower frequency could be like a hit sound, no, hit sound, and it's just less space in a measurement. So yeah, high is not necessarily good or bad, but it's almost interesting to think of it as like saturated, full versus empty. So that's,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
people, like you said earlier, like, oh, I like to talk to the spine because people can understand where the center of their body is. People understand full, people understand empty. They understand pain versus lack of, or I'm really good at mentally connecting with the sensations of my hip on one side. And then there's this like void of I can't even like feel the muscles on my hip on the other side. So it's those like, polar opposites that someone may use. Like I just use a body example. And in the same, the next person, you and I are having conversation and we're talking about energetic things, like we're all trying to talk about the same thing. It's just using the different verbiage for what can get through to somebody and help them on their next step.
Yes. The beauty of quantum energy, quantum healing is that the main, like I feel like the main motto, and I could be wrong by claiming this is the main motto, but
Yeah.
everything's connected. Like everything's connected. That's what it
Yeah.
is. That's it.
Yeah.
Like everything's equal, everything's connected. I mean, you have to be careful with the everything's equal one because somebody would be comparing things, but everything's connected. Like there's no enough, there's no like no. Like
Right.
yeah, like that's just I could talk like an hour about how
I
everything
know.
is,
No, I'm
connected.
glad you
But
said that. It's like
like you
a
just said,
grid of elements, like we are obviously more saturated, that we have created mass by how many particles are in us, but there are elements in the air around us that are just a lot less dense, a lot less, put together. So everything is connected because we're sharing, let's say like you walk near a tree, you're sharing oxygen with a tree and carbon dioxide in this like just we don't have to tell the tree to do that. They don't have to tell us to do that, but it's this constant like exchange. So it's the
yes,
exchange of electricity, the exchange of like electromagnetic frequencies that I would use to describe quantum to people. Um,
yeah.
and it's and not something I start day one with in conversations with people. You're just like
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
trying to like eye people up and listen to where they're at. Um, and I guess the biggest doorway for me has always been the sound to explain frequencies.
Yeah, yeah. I believe that like everything is I mean, if you look at biblical texts, like God said he did, like the first thing is sound. Like the first everything is, I made a
Hmm.
post on Instagram actually like last week. Like we before we were breathed into life, he said, let there be light. You know, everything is
Right.
sound, everything is spoken.
Right.
And
The
I
sound was an
believe if
action.
you were, yes, if you could hear the sound of like objects that even if they are man-made, I feel like they're definitely vibrating a sound. We just can't
Hmm.
tune into that frequency. I saw this ancient way of moving like rocks. They would like create sound frequency and somehow it would spin. Not they weren't moving like across the nation, but it was
Right.
turning it somehow to do something.
Oh, I've
I
seen
don't
that.
have
I've
enough
seen
facts,
like sand. I've seen like
but
what's it called? Cymatics, maybe? I think it's called cymatics. It's basically, whatever the surface is, and there's like sand particles on top, and there's some vibration being exposed underneath the surface, and you can see the sand kind of jumping and falling
yes,
into, from a top view, some type of shape.
like a mandala or a connected some sort of circle or sphere. Yeah, yeah, I've seen it's just like incredible. Like that is a
Hmm.
sound just doing. And I mean, this is another thing. I just thought about it, but like toothpaste and things that are like containers like that, that little like etching where the seam is and where the container would be like closed,
Hmm.
that's actually done by a sound laser.
Really? I've
And
never
this
heard
is like
that.
off topic, way off topic, but you know,
I love that. No, I've never heard of that. I mean, it shows with like that much of with the amount of directed force, what can be moved by motion. It's like if you've ever stood more, I'm going to look into that because that sounds really cool. But it's like if you ever
yeah.
sat in a concert and you're near the speakers, the amps, and it just feels like your chest, it's like inside your chest. It's just
Yeah, you can
sound.
feel a bass. You can feel a bass in a
Yeah.
car. It'll if you have a can on the side of the door, you know, like it'll start rattling. Like, come on, this is
Right.
real. Everything connected, you know, like so. You
Yeah.
know, back to like the spiritual side of things, the quantum realm of like in my practice, and I'm sure in yours too. It's like this is why I'm always like speak kindly to your body. Don't say I can't do that with my body because you know I'm not flexible enough. Like no, that's why you come to yoga to improve
Hmm.
to just be exactly where you are and you know and it's slowly I always say low and slow to your next step but speak kindly to your body because it hears it not
Yeah.
literally but in a different form so like I
Higher
can't do
words
that
have a
you can't
higher
do it
vibration,
yeah
with them.
yeah
I think I've seen some cool studies of like people talking to plants is like a very common understanding.
yeah
Like saying like I love you and good things to plants and then measuring the growth of the plants versus, putting a plant in a negative environment with like harsh words or using like the word hate or something like that. Just the ability for the cells to regenerate and grow was lessened or was like stalled because of the negative
yeah
frequencies we were sending to it.
yeah I've seen countless studies like that like I mean it's insane how accurate water is one of the biggest ones they've just written words but yeah someone
Oh
called it
yeah, the modality,
and
the medium of water and how that allows wavelengths to pass through is, I mean, not that we're dolphins, but like the sonar availability of, some of those really advanced animals is basically a sound out. And then if it hits something and comes back to them, they know that that sound didn't just go out into an abyss. It has met something, and that reverb that comes back to them tells them like how big it is ish, how far away it is. So not that we have this like bio pressure sonar as humans, but like the physical sensation of sound is what we're kind of listening to when, we can hear if you're in an empty room, you can hear how close something is to you, just like it's like a depth perception because of sound.
yeah, it's
We're amazing.
beautiful that yeah, it's so amazing. And I used to dog on the English language. Like, why do we say like what do you mean when mean means like something mean or bad?
Hmm.
Or like why do we say good morning when like it's morning? But there's so many that was like me like harping on this negative idea of what the English
Oh
language
yeah.
was, but there's so many beautiful words that you can use instead, you know, and there's so many and it should feel good to you know revert like beautiful words to somebody like they always say if you don't have And I just say don't say it at all. And it's like, because it comes right back, it reverts like right back to you,
Yeah.
like it's like a boomerang. So knowing that, to just simply do good, not only for like because some authoritative figure told you to, but because of how it feels for you, like you're only enlivening yourself while also helping enliven somebody else. You know what I
The
mean?
lives around you. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And our
And
brains are
that's again,
wired to seek those reward systems. So, once it like understands a sound associated with a action with a good reaction that feels good, it will like save that and be like, "Ooh, let's find more of that." So someone who's living in like this cyclic, like they're stuck in, a pretty low vibrational mindset, or they're going through a really rough time, their brain is just surviving. It's just kind of keeping you safe and keeping you away from triggers that would make you have to face these things. You don't even get the opportunity to find a reward to break through that smog. And so maybe, finding yoga practices or sound healing events, they're becoming super popular, and not just at yoga studios. Like, we have basically a Pilates office, a PT office, gardens, farm to table places, like anywhere that's like a good
everywhere now,
ambiance.
it's like just
Yeah,
every
there's so many
it's
places are offering these sound healing events. And so, maybe that's something that for viewers who are like listening and there's a lot of words going over their head and they're like, I don't even know what that is. This is my like reeling it back in for you of look up some sound healing, look up Tibetan healing bowls. It has nothing to do with like a religion or a certain belief. It is based on frequencies that we cannot necessarily feel because they're so minute, they're so fast in our body. Just asking to be influenced by these gold standard frequencies that hopefully can help you kind of get back into alignment so you can address the next level of your healing journey.
Yeah, I totally agree with just try it. I can guarantee there's one within 20 minutes of you unless you live in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like there's a sound
which
healer
which
somewhere in
we
your
live on an
neighborhood.
island, so if we can find them. um and
Yeah.
sometimes like it's
Yeah.
just, I just tell people, hey, it's going to be relaxing. Do you need to relax tonight? Come to this event. And they wind up being, these people who have just like broken down the door to something that they don't really necessarily understand, but they come every time now. They're like, oh my gosh, I felt tonight's session in my chest, like it was like trying to chip away at something in my chest. Or I remember a time that I went and the whole time was beautiful, but I felt like only here. This is like, I was like almost trying to swallow, like it was getting caught in my throat. This was obviously what needed to like be like shook up to, clear something.
Yeah. Oh my
And it was
gosh. It's so
awesome.
beautiful. I,
I
I
have
like to
sound,
envision. Oh, yeah. Go
say it
ahead, go
again.
ahead.
No, you're
No,
good.
I just like to visualize like these quantum particles because we know that they're there, right? So in yoga, we'd call it prana, which is life force energy. But if you
Mhm.
vision these quantum particles all around the air, and let's say you're going to the sound healing, and there's the sound healer, making the bowls happen or playing some sort of chime, and just visualizing these particles in this room, kind of like they're starting to vibrate at that same sound because you already know you are, and then
Mhm.
you're just filling this bath. That's why a lot of times they're called sound baths. You're
Yep.
in this bath of this specific frequency or multiple frequencies, and they're higher than your density. They're higher than your stagnation,
Mhm.
and it's like it's beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's trying to initiate growth. And that's like one of the final things I wanted to say about this is, I think on learning a little bit about the word quantum and how it pertains to like the quantum particles in our body, these like subatomic particles. So tinier, tinier, tinier than the atoms. They're like the space between atoms. This is what we're talking about, quantum particles. They're so tiny, it's hard to comprehend. But when you think of that tiny aspect of your body to its most minute detail, it helps you realize that you're not stuck. You're not stagnant. You're not peaked and now it's just downhill from here. It's like we are this constantly fluctuating, overlapping, overwriting experience. And if you only really speak in like anatomy terms and you're not ready for like the woo-woo terms, um, your skin, the cells of your skin renew almost every month. The lining of your stomach, these cells kill themselves and turn over every 4 days. Like that's insane. Your liver does it in about 6 weeks. Your I'm trying to think, your bones, based on what your body needs for density and forces you put, your bones know how to add more cells or break down damaged cells. So you don't need to learn the science of this, but I just think opening the conversation, and when someone's working with like a healer, they are thankful to know that there is the ability for regeneration. There is the ability to chisel away these damages, these old things, to create room for new. So that's why I like this conversation.
Yes, it's so
Yeah.
real too, and I understand too, it not maybe making sense because it doesn't seem tangible, but
Mhm.
there are so many opportunities to experience it on a physical level. And I agree with you that sound is probably one of the most accessible. Not even in the terms of like there being somebody in your town that offers it, but like for you not to literally have to do anything, like you just lay there
You just
and
need
you
to
just
show
let it
up.
happen. You just need to show
Yeah,
up.
you
And even
just,
if you're like, this isn't going to work, it's still going to work. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's still happening, no matter if you think it is or isn't, you know?
that's a great point. Because if someone walked into like, took my recommendation to go to this like energy healer, they could go in with this like super quizzical mind and like almost close themselves off from wanting to recognize benefit. The sound, everybody loves music. Everybody loves, like hearing melodic, calming things. So yeah, just showing up, I could see someone just, even if you fall asleep, which actually happens a lot in those sound baths, even if you're falling
Like,
asleep, yeah,
wow.
you're just getting like washed over with this nice background noise, like babies, like sound machines. Let yourself be a baby, like go to one of these things.
For real. For real.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I feel like I kind of, I'm so proud of us. I feel like we really kind of kept it as
I,
entry.
I'm proud. I'm proud of us because any other time we get together, it'd be like we would be talking about like I don't even know right now. It'd be a whole
Yeah.
other
Yeah, we can
area.
branch out pretty heavily. Um, the only other thing I would say, just because we use this word a lot, we never really explained it, keeping it on an electrical definition. So try to keep it to like vibrations, frequencies, and electricity. How would you explain the branch of yoga called Kundalini yoga?
Okie dokie. I'm gonna try
Because
and
that's
reel it
kind
in.
of your niche, right? That's kind of what you have
Yes, that's
embodied
where
in
I've
your
kind of my
practice.
path has led me to, and I'm so grateful for it. I would say Kundalini is um, a dormant like bank or reserve of energy holding and containing your highest potential, and it's inside of everybody. It's inside of the person, an atheist. It's inside of any everything and everybody. And I think that in order to what it is essentially it's a technology, the way we work with it in the yoga terms. You the goal with Kundalini, I guess you could say, is a Kundalini awakening, which would mean you raise this energy, and scientifically, it's cerebrospinal fluid going into your pineal gland. But this doesn't need to only happen in Kundalini yoga. This could happen when you're walking down the street. This could happen after reading a book that really planted some sort of seed and it had no choice but to ignite passion
Mhm.
and inspiration inside of you. It's a feminine energy, and like I said, it's in every single body. And a lot of times that people have a Kundalini awakening, it's usually most of the time spontaneous,
Mm.
and it doesn't always look pretty or fun. A lot of times when you awaken this Kundalini, you might lose like your job, or like you might get a divorce, or it might be the other way. You might get a really good job and get married. It's just that what's happening is your vibrational frequency is so shifted and so provoked that what could be appearing on the outside, your hologram of life, is looking bad or not good. And what's really happening is you're being propelled and pushed like extra rapid speed to where you're supposed to be.
Mhm.
It's leading you to a higher octave. A lot of even when I started teaching Kundalini, I didn't believe that the awakening thing was like a thing,
Right.
but I didn't. I thought it was cliche. I did.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had what I thought was a Kundalini awakening until I realized if it wasn't anything that crazy until I actually had one.
Hmm.
But what happens is emotions surface, and everything starts to feel different. Colors become more vibrant. Scientifically, you could say it's DMT being released out of your lungs from the breath,
Yeah.
or it's just you were doing a movement and it released a pocket of information of stored cells in your fascia that had a memory of something not good, like a trauma or
Yeah.
an unwanted emotion.
No,
Um,
I'm so
I
glad
hope
you
I'm
mentioned that. I mean, no, I'm so glad I
yeah.
asked this because you just nailed that. Like, could not have
I didn't
said
know if
that.
I'm trying to reel it in. Like I'm
No,
trying to
you
not
did
make it seem
so
like
well. You did so well.
it's
I mean, I'm such a visual person. You know, I'm thinking of like someone have these like shakes and they don't know why. They're not like nervous. They're just like feeling euphoric. You know, you're about to go on stage, you're a little nervous, and there's this like your body is sending you these hormones and these things to help you succeed and in your mind that makes your vision very clear. It like amplifies all of these senses that you need to succeed. Or I also thought when you're talking, I also thought of like the glow sticks, like when you crack a glow stick and it emanates, like that's what's happening when someone is working on manual practice. I'm trying to like break up, you know, the stagnation in your body to release that energy release from your cells, your bones, your joints, more I should say your joints. So you know, just to kind of put like human words on it sometimes is like, yeah, this like huge energy shift, this electric upgrade. And the word kundalini can really freak people out sometimes if they have like a certain,
yeah.
you know, religious fear of it. You know, it just has to, you have to use these practices, you have to make them your own words. You have to, you know, make sure you're in an environment where you feel really safe to explore, ask questions. And it doesn't need, it can be as religious as you want, it can be as electric as you want. You know, there's the
Yeah.
scale of you filling yourself in at the appropriate notch. But
Yes. I will leave everybody with a visual
oh,
if I
cool.
can.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so like it's the catechist. So if you guys ever seen the medical symbol, there's like a rod, right? That's your
Mhm.
spine, and then there's two snakes.
Yeah.
And this is your Ida Pingala, which is on your right side, and your Ida is on the right side, and your I'm sorry, Ida is on your left side. I'm getting confused because I'm usually looking at people when I'm explaining it, so
Looking
I'm
at it.
like
Yeah.
and then your Pingala nadi, these are nadis on your right side. So your masculine and your feminine, and these serpents, these snakes, kind of go up your spine. They move and they end up here.
Hmm.
And in these gland, you know, the pineal gland is known to when there's pressure on it and there's fluid. I'm keeping it, reeling it back. It's known to give you insight or an idea or maybe even a visual of
Hmm.
something inside,
Yep.
and this energy moves that way and it comes and your kundalini comes down. It's not always about having a kundalini awakening. Like this energy is always kind of working, but the word means dormant serpent or dormant energy,
Right,
dormant.
right. Which is where I know it gets a lot of like flack from people who are concerned about it in a religious standpoint, you know, but that symbol
And
is
I
in such
had
our
that too.
modern,
Yes.
yeah, that symbol of a central spine, a central nervous system with these two wrapping, intertwining serpents. It almost looks actually like the DNA helix to me sometimes, and
Yes.
and
Yes.
how
Me
they
too. Yeah.
intertwine. But it's just all symbology. It's all people just trying to say, you know, explain the same thing. So when someone uses the word kundalini, I encourage you not to reel back based on something you've heard from somebody. You know, when it's the right time, when you find the right people, the right studio, the right practitioners, you know, give yourself to the practice. And if it's for you, you'll know, you'll feel good, you'll want to try it. And if it's not for you, there are so many other ways to influence the frequencies of your
Yeah.
dormant, you know, dormant instrument, we'll call it. And you just, you know, I think the more people that have conversations like this, the more we make
Well,
normalize, yeah, the more we
yes.
normalize that this is out there.
Yes.
So
Oh my gosh. That was amazing.
yeah, so I'm so glad that you met with me today, Thomas. Thank you for um maybe speaking a little bit more in body terms than we normally do, just like in our personal
This
conversation.
was good for me. This
We
was
did
really
so
good
great.
for me.
And
I am honored,
yeah, and
first
I'm
of
just
all. Thank
laughing
you.
because, you
But
know, sometimes we can go so philosophical, so esoteric, so like big brained. Um, the goal of this chapter was to, you know, look small, to think big, right? So
yeah,
it's like reeling us back into what we can understand, what we can conceptualize, to feel really safe as a launching pad to, you know, maybe start opening the doorway in our mind, in our paradigm, to some of these invisible, harder to grasp concepts. So thank you so much. What are
Thank you.
Thomas, I'm going to tag you in all of these, all of my social media so people can follow you. But do you have a platform that you want people to kind of read more about?
I would say I post often on either TikTok as Tantra Thomas,
Okay,
and on Instagram, Thomas Shoot underscore is where you'll usually find me like most active. I post my workshops, my offerings, my online offerings, everything, my day-to-day life.
love it.
And yeah, but yes, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, this is so fun. All right. Well, have a great rest of your day. And I can't wait to come on for Thomas 2.0 to get to some of the deeper stuff.
I can't wait either. I'm gonna be like, I can't
All right,
wait.
Thomas, I'll see you later. Bye.
See ya. See ya.